Night falls slowly, and perhaps everything around you is beginning to soften after a long day. If you are an Aquarius, you may already be familiar with watching your own emotions from a quiet distance, not to avoid them, but to understand them more clearly. The heart of Aquarius often feels like the night sky, wide, deep, and sometimes filled with very subtle movements that not everyone notices right away. Lately, there may be a feeling inside you that is difficult to name, not necessarily a big story, just a very gentle shift. Like when a soft breeze glides across the surface of a lake and leaves behind the faintest circles on the water, a glance that lingers a few seconds longer than usual, an old memory suddenly returning when you least expect it. Oh, a name quietly appearing in your thoughts and staying there a little longer than it normally would. People often say that the things that truly matter in life rarely arrive the way we expect them to. They unfold slowly, almost silently, until one day we begin to wonder whether what we are feeling is simply coincidence or something deeper gradually opening within us. And perhaps today's story begins with that very small moment, when a feeling that may have been hidden for a long time suddenly begins to grow, in a way that the heart can no longer pretend not to notice. Some feelings enter a person's life in a very unusual way. They don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with dramatic moments like the ones you see in romantic movies. Instead, they appear slowly, almost quietly. You'd like opening a window on a calm afternoon and suddenly realizing that a cool breeze has been moving through the room. No one saw it enter. No sound marked the moment. Yet, somehow, you can feel that the space has changed a little. Many Aquarius understand this feeling very well. Their hearts often resemble a wide room with many open windows. They observe their emotions carefully, sometimes keeping them just far enough away to understand them before giving them a name. Not because Aquarius are cold, and not because they fear emotion. More often, they simply want to be sure that what they are feeling is real, not just a passing wave of sentiment. So certain feelings are kept for a long time in a very quiet corner of the heart, a place where no one else sees them, a place that even Aquarius themselves sometimes walk past without stopping. But emotions have a very unique way of growing. They do not rush. They do not seek attention. They grow quietly through small moments that at first seem unimportant. A casual glance that stays in memory a little longer than expected. A conversation that seemed ordinary, yet later keeps returning to your thoughts. A soft warmth when thinking about someone, even without a clear reason. Time passes, and little pieces begin to connect. Then one day, Aquarius may suddenly realize that the feeling is no longer small. It is no longer just a passing thought, no longer something that can easily be pushed aside. It becomes a very real presence, alive inside the quiet space of the heart. What's interesting is this kind of change rarely happens in a single moment. More often it unfolds like the arrival of dawn. The sky does not turn bright all at once. Before that, there are long stretches of stillness, layers of color shifting slowly in ways only the attentive eye can notice. Perhaps Aquarius is standing in that very moment now, a moment when a feeling begins to step out from the silence where it once lived, not to draw attention, not to disturb the balance of life, simply because some emotions, after growing quietly for long enough, seem to reach a point where they wish to be acknowledged. And perhaps the most important thing in moments like this is not immediately understanding where everything might lead. Sometimes the most valuable thing is simply to pause for a moment, listen to the rhythm of your own heartbeat, and recognize that in this vast world, the simple fact that a sincere feeling has found its place inside your heart is already something very beautiful. Sincere emotions have a very curious nature. People can try to delay them. They can place them in a quiet corner of their lives. They can even use logic to explain them away, telling themselves that perhaps it isn't really that important. And yet, the feelings that truly reach the heart rarely disappear just because we decide to ignore them. They stay. They remain inside moments that seem completely ordinary in the middle of a day. Aquarius may know this feeling very well. Imagine a day when you are busy with work, with your own thoughts, with plans that keep your mind moving forward. And suddenly a small memory returns. Not a dramatic one, Just a simple image, an old conversation, a brief smile you once shared, or a quiet moment when two people sat together in silence, yet somehow never felt distant. Memories like that sometimes return without warning, and what makes them special is not the memory itself, it is the feeling that comes with it. A very gentle warmth, not strong enough to change everything at once, but clear enough to remind you that the feeling never truly left. Perhaps lately, Aquarius has begun to notice small shifts in the way the heart responds to someone, a glance that lingers just a little longer, a thought that returns more often than expected, a sense of familiarity appearing even inside quiet pauses. No one says anything. There is no confirmation, no official conversation about what any of it means. And yet sometimes the energy between two people changes before words ever have the chance to follow. That you can feel it in the way two people look at each other, in the way a conversation suddenly feels deeper without either person trying to make it so, or in the quiet moments that no longer feel awkward. It is a little like a lake perfectly still, everything calm until a small stone touches the water. There is no loud sound, just one circle forming on the surface, then another and another. The ripples are gentle, yet they continue to move outward. Real emotions sometimes move in exactly this way. They do not need grand declarations. They do not need to instantly change two lives. Sometimes a very small movement inside the heart is enough to open a new awareness. Perhaps Aquarius is standing in that very moment now. A moment when the heart begins to realize that pretending not to feel anything may no longer be necessary. Not because everything is clear, not because the story is guaranteed to lead somewhere certain, but because there are times when simply being honest with your own feelings is already a very meaningful step. And from that honesty, the quiet ripples of emotion begin to spread, slowly, naturally, just like a peaceful lake, gradually changing after the lightest touch upon its surface. After the first ripples touch the quiet lake of emotion, things rarely become clear right away. Life continues as it always does. Days move forward in their familiar rhythm, and yet, somewhere inside, a new awareness begins to appear. Not something dramatic, just very small signals that perhaps went unnoticed before. A conversation happening at the exact moment you weren't expecting it. A pair of eyes meeting yours for a brief second. The simple sentence. Yet somehow, it stays in your mind longer than you thought it would. From the outside, these moments may seem very small, almost unimportant. But to a heart that is quietly listening, they begin to feel like tiny lights appearing one by one in a wide night sky. Aquarius often carries a unique sensitivity when it comes to the subtle shifts of energy between people. They don't always rush to explain what they feel. Their intuition often arrives first, long before logic has time to arrange everything into a clear story. So, perhaps lately, in the middle of very ordinary moments, you've started noticing that the atmosphere between you and someone else feels slightly different. Not a dramatic change, just a familiar feeling growing a little deeper. A conversation lasting a few minutes longer. A silence that no longer feels awkward. A quiet sense of reassurance knowing that somewhere in this vast world, that person still exists within it. Small signals like these rarely cause an immediate disruption. They move slowly, like doors opening gently inside a long corridor of life. You walk past them many times, until one day you suddenly notice a thin line of light beginning to shine through. Perhaps Aquarius is standing in a moment like this, a time when everything is still delicate, still soft, and not yet defined. Nothing needs to be explained too quickly. Nothing needs to be decided right away. There is simply a very subtle shift in the way the heart responds to the world. And sometimes these small changes carry very beautiful lessons. They remind us that emotions do not need to be loud in order to be meaningful. The deepest connections are often built from the simplest moments, an honest conversation, a silence shared comfortably between two people, or just the quiet feeling that somewhere between two hearts, there exists a natural understanding. Perhaps the most valuable thing during a time like this is not finding an answer right away, but allowing yourself to notice these small signals calmly. The same way someone sits beneath the night sky and slowly realizes that more and more stars are appearing. They are never in a hurry, yet each small light quietly helps illuminate the entire sky. When small signals begin appearing a little more often, people sometimes feel something unusual, as if the pieces of life are shifting slightly. Not in a way that turns everything upside down, more like standing in a familiar room. And suddenly noticing that today the sunlight touches the window at a slightly different angle. Some people call it coincidence. Others call it destiny or timing. For Aquarius, it is often felt in a very personal way. They don't always feel the need to find an explanation right away. Aquarius tends to understand that life often carries layers of meaning far deeper than what the eyes can immediately see. And sometimes, the connections between people are quietly woven from very small details. Details we only recognize when we look back. Perhaps, lately, you have experienced a few moments like this. One day, you suddenly think about someone. And a few hours later, a message appears. A meeting happens at a moment you never expected. A story that once felt finished suddenly returns, but with a different feeling than before. Moments like these don't always need to be treated as some kind of special sign. Life, after all, is often just a continuous flow of events. And yet, there are times when deep inside, we begin to sense that the timing of things is quietly changing, like the seasons of the year. No one orders spring to arrive. There is no bell announcing its entrance. But one day you step outside and realize the air feels different. The light feels different. Even the scent in the wind has changed. Seasonal change often happens in this gentle way. Human connections can unfold much the same. They are rarely arranged through grand events. More often, they grow from very ordinary moments. A conversation arriving at just the right time, a glance lasting 1 second longer, or the quiet presence of someone that somehow makes the heart feel a little more at ease. Aquarius tends to be very sensitive to these subtle shifts, not because they are always searching for hidden meaning in everything, but because they tend to listen to the quiet flow of life more deeply than most. So, when small coincidences begin to appear, they rarely rush to conclusions. They simply observe, like someone standing beside a river, watching the water move gently forward. There is no need to know exactly where the river will end. It is enough to notice that it is moving. Perhaps Aquarius is standing in a moment like this, a phase when small details of life begin connecting in new ways. Nothing dramatic, nothing that demands immediate explanation, just a very soft feeling that something is shifting in the quiet space between two people. And sometimes, simply noticing that movement is already enough to allow the heart to open just a little more. When the small movements of life begin to connect with one another, people sometimes realize something very interesting about truly deep connections. They rarely disappear completely. They may drift away for a while. They may pass through long stretches of silence where no one speaks about them. Life may lead two people down very different paths. And yet, if a connection once touched the deepest part of the heart, then somewhere its energy still exists, not in a loud or dramatic way, but more like a small flame held gently against the wind. At times it may seem as though it has gone out, when in truth it may simply be waiting for a little breath of air to glow again. Aquarius often understands this feeling very well. They are not the kind of people who return to the past out of habit. In fact, Aquarius usually moves forward with a wider view of life, but deep inside, they also know that some connections carry a very particular meaning, not because they were perfect, not because there were never distances or misunderstandings, but because in their most honest moments, those connections once opened the heart in a way that is rare. And so, sometimes after a long stretch of time, an old connection can return, not in the same shape as before, not with the same people who once stood in that moment. The expectations may have changed, the misunderstandings may have softened. Time often performs a quiet kind of miracle. It allows people to grow. Things that once felt confusing can begin to make sense. Moments that once provoked quick reactions can later be seen with calm and understanding. And when two people meet again after each has walked their own journey, sometimes they discover that the connection between them has also changed. There is less urgency, less to prove. What remains is simply a familiar feeling, but deeper. Like returning to a road you once walked many years ago. The road is still there, yet the way you walk upon it has changed. Perhaps Aquarius is sensing something similar right now. Not a perfect love story like the ones in fairy tales. Life rarely unfolds that way. But perhaps there is a connection slowly becoming clearer, little by little. A more natural understanding between two people, a quieter sense of peace when thinking about that person. A presence that allows the heart to relax its defenses just a little more. Sometimes the true value of a connection is not found in when it arrives, but in how it grows alongside the people within it. And perhaps the most beautiful thing Aquarius can do in moments like this is not to rush to define where the story must lead, but simply to acknowledge it with honesty. Because when a connection is built upon respect, growth, and understanding, it rarely needs to prove anything dramatic. It only needs to exist, in its own quiet and natural way. After all the small movements that have quietly passed, the memories that suddenly returned, the meetings that once seemed ordinary, the feelings that slowly grew through the years, perhaps the thing that brings the deepest peace is not finding an answer for everything. Sometimes, what matters more is simply accepting that a feeling exists. There is no need to rush to explain what it is. No need to give it a perfectly clear name, because some emotions, when defined too quickly, somehow become smaller than what they truly are. Aquarius often understands this very well. They are not the kind who step into a story just because a passing feeling appears. The heart of Aquarius is much like a vast night sky, wide enough to observe, to reflect, to feel the smallest movements of life. So, when a connection appears in a very gentle way, they usually take time to listen to it, without forcing it, without rushing it, simply allowing it to exist within the quiet space of the heart. Some feelings in life do not need to become a grand story to carry meaning. Sometimes their value lives inside the simplest moments. A conversation that somehow lightens the mind, a presence that makes a long day feel a little warmer. Moments like these do not need to prove anything. They only need to be felt. Perhaps Aquarius is standing in a very particular phase of the emotional journey, a place where everything still feels soft, still open, and not yet bound by rigid definitions. A time when the heart begins to trust the natural rhythm of life. Because one thing many Aquarius gradually discover over time is that the deepest connections rarely appear in the way people expect. They do not always arrive when we are waiting. They do not always come in the shape we once imagined. But when we look back, we often realize they appeared at the exact moment the heart had grown enough to recognize their value. Like a star that only becomes visible when the sky is dark enough. Like the dawn that can only be seen after patiently waiting through the night. The deepest connections in life often grow in that same way. Slowly, quietly, yet with a quiet strength that lasts. And perhaps the most beautiful thing Aquarius can do right now is not to search for a final conclusion, but simply to continue walking the journey with a heart just a little more open, trusting that if a feeling truly belongs on your path, it will continue to grow in the natural rhythm of life. If you are an Aquarius and something in this story reflects a part of your own journey, remember that every heart has its own rhythm. No emotional path is ever exactly the same as another. And sometimes the most meaningful thing we can do is simply listen a little more deeply to ourselves and trust that sincere things in life always find a way to appear at the right moment. And who knows, perhaps on a very ordinary day, you will suddenly realize that a feeling that once seemed small has quietly become a beautiful part of your journey.